dropped his towel right in front of me and didn't flinch when I looked. I froze, not just because of what I saw, but because of the way he stood there, like he already knew what that moment meant. We were alone in the locker room, the air still heavy with sweat and steam, but something else had filled the space now. Tension, thick and silent, curling around us like heat rising off skin. I met Mason just a few weeks ago, not on an app or at a bar, but the most unlikely place, our local gym. I had started going again after work, mostly to clear my head and keep the stress of long office hours from building up in my chest. He was new to the area and told me he joined for the same reasons. The first time we spoke, it was after a late session. He'd asked if I was done with the pull-up bar, and I said yeah, but then we both stood there and talked for 20 minutes about anything but fitness. From there, it became easy, almost too easy. We started spotting each other during lifts, syncing up our routines, joking between sets, sharing water bottles, playlists, dumb jokes about protein and form. But behind the casual ease of our friendship, there was a quiet current neither of us named. The way his hands would linger on my lower back during assisted lifts. The way I caught myself staring when he peeled off his hoodie, chest damp, muscles flexing just slightly under sweat-slick skin. Mason wasn't just good-looking. He had that kind of smile that made you forget what you were doing. Tall, but not intimidating. Strong, but not showy. He always wore these old cut-off shirts and threadbare gym shorts, like he didn't care about impressing anyone. But every time he smiled at me across the gym floor, I felt something thud in my chest that had nothing to do with cardio. And today, something shifted. Hey, if you're here and feeling the vibe already, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to support these stories and help more people find them. It means the world, and it keeps us going. Thanks for being here. It was later than usual. The gym was nearly empty, fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead as we finished a punishing shoulder workout. We pushed hard, laughing through the burn, both of us shirtless by the end. It was almost a competition, but not really. It was more like testing limits. Seeing how far we could go physically, emotionally, without saying what we both felt building between us. We made our way to the locker room, both of us towel-draped and breathless. The room echoed, empty except for us, steam still swirling near the showers in the back. I opened my locker. He leaned against his, eyes flicking to mine in the mirror. We didn't speak for a minute, just breathed. Then I heard the soft thud of fabric hitting the tile. I turned. His towel was on the ground. He was standing there completely bare, his eyes on me. Not arrogant, not teasing, but open, exposed in more ways than one. I figured if we're still pretending we should stop, he said, voice low, steady. I didn't move at first. I couldn't. My chest felt too full of something I hadn't let myself name. I swallowed hard, then stepped toward him, slowly, like my body already knew the choreography. The tension between us cracked wide open. His hand reached out, resting gently against my waist, fingers brushing warm skin. My own hand found his chest, steady and firm under my touch. I looked up, and he was already watching me. Soft, serious, like he'd waited longer than I knew. Neither of us spoke. And then he leaned in, lips brushing mine, light at first, testing the air between us. When I didn't pull away, he deepened the kiss, his other hand sliding along my side, pulling me in, our bare bodies now flush, breath mixing, heartbeats pounding against each other like fists on a closed door finally flung open, and the locker room faded away. The moment our lips met, the world narrowed to nothing but breath and skin and contact. Mason kissed like he lifted, focused, present, with purpose behind every movement. There was no hesitation in him, no flicker of doubt, just the steady rhythm of someone who'd been holding back for far too long and finally let it break open. His hands slid up along my back, fingers splaying across my shoulder blades, grounding me with his warmth. My own hands found their way to his waist, palms smoothing over the hard curve of his hips. I felt every inch of him, every breath, every shift, every part of him pressed close. It was intense, yes, but it wasn't rushed. This wasn't about impulse, it was deliberate. The steam still drifted in lazy curls from the showers behind us, catching the overhead lights and wrapping around our bodies like a veil. My back bumped softly against the cold tile wall, and Mason leaned in, one hand braced beside my head, the other trailing down slowly, fingers dancing along my ribs. "You've been driving me crazy," he said, voice husky, words spoken right against my lips. "Every time we work out, every time you laugh at something dumb, I say, I keep wondering what it would feel like to be close to you like this." I swallowed, heart pounding so hard, it felt like it echoed off the walls. "Then why didn't you say something?" "Because I didn't know if you'd stop me," he admitted, brushing his nose against mine. "I couldn't tell if I was imagining it or if you felt it too." "I did," I whispered, the confession catching in my throat. "Since the first time you spotted me." He grinned, small and a little shaky, like hearing it out loud hit him harder than expected. "Good," he murmured, "because I don't want to hold back anymore." At this point, I expected it to turn fast, something urgent and messy, desire breaking loose. But it didn't. Instead, Mason slowed everything down. His mouth returned to mine, softer now, more intentional, like he was tasting instead of taking. His hand moved with care, fingertips tracing lines along my abdomen, exploring with reverence. Every touch was a question, every breath between us, an answer. And this is where most stories pull back. But what kept this moment unforgettable wasn't what we did, it was how we did it. Mason dropped back slightly, his hands resting on my sides, thumbs brushing my hips. "I want to take my time," he said, voice low. "I want to remember everything about this." "You will," I told him. "So will I." He kissed me again, slower this time, deeper, and I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't a quick locker room secret. It was the start of something. A question asked with hands and mouths, and the kind of closeness that couldn't be faked. Somewhere between the kisses and the touches, I closed my eyes and felt his forehead rest against mine. We were still pressed chest to chest, skin to skin, but the urgency had melted into something else, something tender. "You okay?" he asked, breath barely a whisper. "I'm more than okay," I said, eyes fluttering open. "I just didn't expect this." "Me neither," he admitted, brushing his thumb along my cheek. "But now I don't want it to stop." Neither did I. And in that silence, something settled. Not the moment itself, but the meaning behind it. This wasn't a one-time spark. This was the beginning of something bigger than either of us planned when we first walked into that gym. The locker room was still empty, but everything inside me felt full. Full of breath, adrenaline, warmth, and that strange, wild calm that only comes when you finally stop pretending. Mason stood just inches from me, still flushed, his fingers resting lightly on my side, like he hadn't realized he was still touching me. Neither of us moved. Not yet. His eyes flicked up to meet mine again, this time slower, softer, and something in his gaze shifted, like the haze of heat between us had burned off just enough to let vulnerability rise through the cracks. And honestly, that hit me harder than any kiss. "You're not freaking out?" he asked suddenly, voice quieter now, almost too casual, but his grip tightened just slightly, as if bracing for a rejection that hadn't come. I shook my head, smiling, heart still pounding. "I was the second your towel hit the floor. But now?" I paused, brushing a hand along his bare arm. "Now I just want to figure out what this is." His exhale came slow and audible, like the breath he didn't realize he'd been holding finally escaped. He stepped back half a pace, letting the tension ease a little. "Okay," he said. "Okay, good. Because I don't want this to be just a one-time thing." Then came the shift. I reached for my shirt, needing something, anything, to anchor myself. "We should probably..." I trailed off, nodding toward the bench, the rows of lockers. "Put on clothes before someone walks in." He laughed, running a hand through his messy hair. "Right. Kinda forgot this is, a public place." But as we both dressed in a kind of wordless daze, I couldn't help stealing glances at him, watching the way he moved now that we'd crossed a line neither of us had expected to. He caught me once, mid-glance, and instead of looking away, he smirked. "What?" "You just look, different," I said, pulling my shirt over my head. He raised an eyebrow. "Different good or different bad?" I stepped toward him, grabbing my gym bag, deliberately brushing his shoulder as I passed. "Different better." It was in that small gesture, a look, a tease, a slow return to rhythm, that the balance began to rebuild. But nothing was the same. As we walked out of the locker room together, the hallway felt oddly quiet, like the gym had dimmed a few notches while we were inside. Mason walked beside me, our shoulders brushing again and again, neither of us stepping away. "Are you free later?" he asked suddenly, not looking at me. "After work?" I blinked. "You mean outside of the gym?" He glanced over, expression unreadable for a second, then nodded. "Yeah, I want to see you again. Like, just you. No squats, no bench press, no excuses." My stomach fluttered, half nerves, half disbelief. "Dinner?" "Or something simpler," he said. "Something real." I nodded slowly, a smile tugging at my lips. "Yeah, I'd like that." He paused at the exit doors, turning to face me, eyes serious for the first time since we left the locker room. "This isn't just about the locker room for me," he said. "I know how this might look, but I've been thinking about you since the first time we trained legs together." I laughed, because it was honest, because I had to, and it made something inside me settle. Then I guess we've both been hiding in plain sight. "Not anymore," he said, and with that he leaned in, just slightly. Not a kiss, not a touch, but close enough to feel like a promise. We walked out into the sun side by side, bodies sore from lifting, hearts light from something entirely different. Not a hookup, not just heat, something beginning. Later that evening, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, towel around my waist, hair still damp from the shower, heart beating harder than it had all day. Yes, harder than deadlifts and incline presses combined. My phone buzzed on the counter behind me. I didn't need to check who it was.
I already knew. Mason, I'm parked outside. No pressure if you want to cancel, but I'm hoping you don't. No clever emoji, no nervous LOL. Just honesty, the same kind I saw in his eyes when he stood bare in front of me in the locker room and waited to be seen. I typed back before I could overthink it. Me. Come up, third floor, doors cracked. Minutes later, I heard footsteps on the stairs, each one syncing with my pulse. Then a soft knock, not because the door was locked, but because he was polite like that. I opened it, and there he was. Same messy hair, same crooked grin, now paired with a faded hoodie and black joggers that made him look softer, more real than I'd ever seen him in the gym. He stepped inside slowly, eyes scanning the apartment like he needed a second to adjust to seeing me in my space. He smelled like clean soap and laundry detergent and a little bit of nervous energy. "This feels weird," he admitted, shifting from foot to foot. "Like first date, even though we already skipped ahead." I smiled, brushing my hand lightly against his. That wasn't skipping. That was something else. He followed me to the couch, sat close, but not too close, and let the silence settle for a second before speaking again. "I wasn't sure if you'd regret it." I turned to look at him, surprised. "Why would I?" "Because that moment, what happened, it could have felt like a fluke. Heat of the moment. I just didn't want it to mess up whatever was happening between us before." I leaned back, letting my shoulder touch his. "Mason, I don't think we were just gym buddies. I think we were two guys pretending we were." That made him exhale, relieved maybe, and he laughed softly. "Yeah," he said. "You're right. I mean, no offense, but I don't look at other guys' post-leg day stretch routine like I look at yours." We both laughed at that, easing the tension without losing the charge that still hummed quietly beneath the surface. Then he reached for my hand. Not dramatically, not with a statement, just slid his fingers between mine like we'd done it before. And in a way, we had, just not like this. "I've dated guys before," he said after a minute, "but none of it ever felt like it stuck, like I was chasing a version of myself I didn't actually know." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I've been out for years, but I think I forgot how it feels to want something and not be afraid of it." He looked at me then, really looked, and leaned in, his forehead brushing mine, a quiet question in the closeness. "I'm not afraid of this," he whispered. "Me neither," I whispered back. He kissed me again, and this time it wasn't heated or rushed. It was slow, careful, like he was committing it to memory. His hand cupped my jaw, his thumb brushing the corner of my mouth as if he couldn't believe this was real. The kiss deepened naturally, and when he pushed me back against the cushions, hovering just above, I felt the same weight as earlier, but different now. Not pressure, presence. He wasn't trying to take anything, he was trying to give. His hands slid up under my shirt, exploring like he was seeing me for the first time. He didn't rush when he kissed my neck or when he traced my ribs, his fingertips brushing the skin with reverence. It wasn't lust anymore. It was curiosity and trust, wrapped in warmth. "You okay?" he asked again. "Better than okay," I said, my breath catching. "I've been waiting for this without realizing it." He smiled, and I could feel it against my skin as he kissed down my chest, slower, warmer, drawing goosebumps with every inch. This wasn't just a locker room moment anymore. This was something real.
Mason stayed the night. After everything, after the kisses, the quiet words exchanged between couch cushions and soft moans in the dark, it didn't feel strange when he pulled me into bed. He slipped under the sheets like he'd always been there, like the space beside me had been waiting. We didn't speak much after the lights went out, just shared the language of slow touches beneath the blanket, fingers tracing lines over bare skin, foreheads pressing gently in the hush of something new being born. He fell asleep fast. I didn't. I lay there awake for a while, my heart still beating with the echo of everything we'd just shared. I watched his chest rise and fall beside me, his hand resting lightly on my stomach, like he was still holding on in sleep, like even his dreams weren't ready to let go. And then, at 2:14 a.m., my phone lit up. Unknown number. I almost let it go. Maybe a wrong number, maybe a drunk dial. But something about it, a knot in my chest I couldn't explain, made me reach for the phone. "Hello?" I whispered, careful not to wake Mason. The voice on the other end stopped everything cold. "Hey," it said. Low, familiar, hesitant. It was Nate, my ex, the one who disappeared without really explaining, the one who needed time and space and a new coast, the one I hadn't spoken to in almost a year, who, for a long time, I thought I'd never stop missing. Until Mason. "I know it's late," he said, his voice thinner than I remembered, like it had been wrung out by something heavy. I just didn't know who else to call. I sat up slowly, pulling the sheet around me. "What's going on?" "I'm in town," he said, a pause long enough to tighten my chest. "Something happened. I didn't know who else would answer." I looked toward the bedroom. Mason was still asleep, his brow furrowed slightly, like even unconscious he could feel something shifting. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," Nate admitted. "I'm outside the building. I didn't plan it. I just drove." My mouth went dry. I stood and padded into the hallway, heart pounding, not from longing, but from the weight of something unresolved crashing into what had just begun. I stood barefoot on the hardwood floor, phone warm against my cheek, stomach flipping. "I'm not alone," I said, barely above a whisper. A long silence stretched across the line. Too long. "Oh," Nate said eventually. "Yeah, of course. I shouldn't have called. That was selfish." He didn't sound angry, just lost. "Nate?" But he'd already hung up. I stood there staring at the darkened screen, at the echo of a person I hadn't thought I needed anymore. And I didn't, not really. But his voice brought back the part of me that once waited for his name on my phone every night. It reminded me that I used to think love came with complications and late night calls and ghosted feelings. And then I remembered who was still in my bed. Mason. Steady, grounded, open. I walked back into the bedroom quietly, setting the phone down without a sound, slipped back beneath the blanket, and immediately Mason shifted toward me, arm instinctively finding its way around my waist again. "Everything okay?" He mumbled sleepily, his breath warm against the back of my neck. "Yeah," I whispered, turning toward him, pressing my forehead to his. "Just a weird call." He didn't ask who, he didn't pry. He just nodded against me and tightened his hold slightly, as if to say, "You're here now, and I've got you." But I didn't sleep. Not because I wanted Nate back, but because the past always has a way of asking one final question just before you fully move on. And now, in the silence of this room, with Mason's heartbeat sinking to mine beneath the covers, I realized exactly how I would answer. The morning sunlight crept in slowly, stretching across the sheets like it was trying not to wake us. But I was already wide awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, trying to make sense of the weight sitting quietly on my chest. Mason was still asleep, one arm flung over my waist, his bare skin warm against mine, his breathing slow and steady. I didn't want to move, not just because he looked peaceful, but because I didn't know what would change if I did. The call from Nate still echoed in my head. Not because I wanted him back, but because of the way it shook something loose I thought I'd already buried. It reminded me of who I used to be, who I was when I let people leave without answers, who I was when I thought love meant chasing someone who didn't want to be caught. Mason stirred beside me. His fingers flexed slightly against my side. Then he blinked awake, turning toward me with that soft, sleep-dazed smile that hit me right in the gut. "Morning," he murmured. "Morning," I said back, forcing a smile I wasn't sure landed. He sat up slightly, running a hand through his hair. "You're quiet?" "I didn't sleep much." He tilted his head. "Last night?" I hesitated. He saw it. He always saw it. "You said it was a weird call," he said slowly, carefully. "Was it someone you know?" I exhaled, sat up, looked at him straight on. It was Nate. Mason's expression didn't change much, but I felt the shift in his posture, in the way his hand dropped from my waist to the sheets. "Your ex?" "Yeah," I said. He didn't know who else to call. Said he was outside. I told him I wasn't alone. Mason was quiet. "I didn't invite him in," I added quickly. "I didn't want to." He looked down at his hands, then up at me again, his eyes calm but sharper now. "Did it shake something loose for you?" There it was. The question I didn't want to hear, but knew I had to answer. "No," I said, then softer. "Not about him, but maybe about me." That landed somewhere deeper than I expected. I don't want to be someone who runs back to old stories just because a new one's still being written, I said, heart pounding now. "You mean something to me, Mason. Last night wasn't just heat or curiosity. It was more than that." He nodded slowly, jaw tight. "But?" "No but," I said quickly. "Just honesty, because I think you deserve that." A long silence stretched between us. Then he said, "I've had people pull away for less." "I'm not pulling away," I whispered. "Then let me ask something else," he said. "If he called again tonight and you were alone, would you open the door?" I froze because I didn't know. Not out of desire, but out of unfinished pages. Out of the habit of answering people even when you don't owe them anything anymore. "I'd want to say no," I said honestly. "But I think I'd need to say no. And that's different." Mason studied me for a long moment. Then slowly, he leaned in, resting his forehead to mine, just like he had last night. "That's a hard truth," he whispered, "but I'd rather have that than a pretty lie." His hands found mine, fingers interlacing gently. "Just promise me," he said quietly. "If we're going to do this, we do it fully,
present, not chasing ghosts. I promise, I whispered back, and I meant it. Even if the past knocked again, I already knew where I'd be standing. Right here, with him. That day passed differently than any other I'd spent with Mason. Not because we didn't talk. Actually, we talked more than we ever had. But because every word felt heavier now, more honest, like neither of us wanted to miss a step or leave anything unsaid. After breakfast, toast and eggs made in the quiet rhythm of people still trying to find their emotional footing, we sat across from each other at the small kitchen table, mugs of coffee warming our hands, and looked each other in the eye without flinching. "Can I ask something?" Mason said, voice steady but soft. I nodded. "When Nate called last night, was part of you hoping it was a sign? Like the universe testing you?" That question sat heavy between us. I thought for a moment. Not just to answer him, but to answer myself. "I think part of me was afraid it was a test," I said. "Not because I wanted him back, but because I wasn't sure I deserved something better yet." Mason didn't blink. He didn't interrupt. "I've always been the one who holds on to old things," I continued. Conversations, photos, messages I should have deleted. And when Nate showed up in my life again, even just for a second, I realized something. I didn't feel anything I used to feel. No longing, no guilt, just clarity. "What kind of clarity?" he asked quietly. "That I was finally done building homes out of people who only ever wanted to pass through." Mason stared at me for a beat, then stood from the table. My heart paused until he stepped around behind me, wrapped his arms around my shoulders, and rested his chin against the top of my head. "That's the realest thing anyone's ever said to me," he whispered. I leaned into his chest, letting the moment stretch. Then something shifted again, this time not with tension, but comfort. Like we'd just passed a checkpoint neither of us had words for. Later that afternoon, we went for a walk. Not to talk more, not to dissect anything, but just to be. Side by side, hands brushing, our strides finding rhythm without trying. It was cloudy, the kind of cool fall day where everything smells like leaves and wood and something crisp in the air, and it felt right somehow. At one point we paused near the edge of a quiet park, and Mason looked at me, serious again. "You know, I've been single a while," he said. "Not because I don't want love, but because I got tired of giving pieces of myself to people who didn't know what to do with them." I turned toward him. "And now?" He took a breath. "Now I want to give all those pieces to someone who holds them like they matter, even the ones that don't shine." My throat tightened, heart thudding. "I don't need shiny," I said. "I just need real." He smiled, slow and full of something settled. Then he reached for my hand again. This time not just to hold it, but to show me something. That he was still here, still choosing me, still ready. We walked back together in the fading light, and nothing about us felt uncertain anymore. Not perfect, but steady. And that was more than enough. That evening, Mason came back over with two things: a bag of groceries and a small potted plant. "What's the plant for?" I asked, smiling as he handed it to me. He shrugged, bashful in a way I hadn't seen before. "Thought your window could use something green. And maybe it could be, ours." I didn't know what to say at first because it was simple and it was everything. We cooked together that night, shoulder to shoulder in the kitchen,
laughing as he burned the garlic and I dropped half the pasta on the floor. It wasn't perfect, but neither of us needed it to be. After dinner, we curled up on the couch under one blanket, legs tangled, the city outside glowing soft and quiet through the windows. I leaned my head on his chest, his arm around me, thumb brushing slow circles on my side. "I'm glad you stayed," I murmured. He kissed the top of my head. "I'm not going anywhere." And I believed him. No more ghosts, no more late-night phone calls from the past. Just two guys figuring it out. One plant, one promise, one breath at a time. And when we fell asleep on the couch, still tangled up in each other, it wasn't because we were exhausted. It was because, finally, we were safe. Together. If you made it to the end, drop a comment that says, "The plant is ours now, so we know exactly who stayed for the whole story." And if it made you feel something, share it. Someone else might need this kind of soft ending too. Until next time, stay open, stay grounded, stay real.